Public liability. What is the most common type of claim? Some images there of slips, carrying too much down the stairs, obviously cables. But what it's designed for is that it protects the council against claims from third parties. So this is a third party claim rather than your own people. So visitors, service users, contractors, for injury or damage for which they are found to be legally liable. Most liability claims we find arise from play areas. Children fall off things, and then somebody they have to blame the council in a lot of cases. At events, around buildings, around the access to car parks, steps, trips up doorways, and around car parks. You know that car parks can deteriorate. They can also suffer from weather-related issues. So there are a lot of claims regarding liability arise from these areas. So repeat. That's just another reminder you'll see popping up. This is an insurer comment. Are insured were unable to disclose the required documents and evidence of implementation. Therefore, an admission of liability was unavoidable. This is going to keep popping up, and this is just to remind you that if you can't provide evidence that you've controlled the risk, then the insurers aren't going to be able to protect you. They will try and fight the claim as best they can, because that's what the policy is there for. But ultimately, it'll end up being a claim on your record for, it could be thousands of pounds, and it will always be there for years to come. Play areas and open spaces. What's the matter with that picture on the right there? I mean, that's it's a reminder, really. Hopefully, we never see something like that. But if it's maybe a natural surface these days, the weather tends to deteriorate the grassed areas, and you end up with pools of water where it's just worn away. And that in this, where it's continuously needs to be assessed to say, well, okay, we need to do something about that hole that's appeared in that play park, because somebody might fall in it. It could be a claim waiting to happen. If you ended up with something serious, you see on the picture obviously that's an arson attack, but if there is a piece of equipment that's damaged, it needs to be taken out of action, and so that people can't use it, because they will try and use it if it's there, and end up with another claim. A few stats that we produce: 60% of incidents don't occur on play equipment itself, but on the ancillary items. So we're talking about, so they tripped, as we was talking about, on the hole in the grass, or they hurt themselves on the gate going into the play park itself. So it's maybe not always to do with the actual equipment. Estimated there are approximately 40,000 visits to hospital per year. Management causes: poor equipment design or failure to comply to standards. I hope that doesn't apply anymore, because, say, all local councils generally will use a reputable playground company and inspection company who will make sure they're up to date with the current standards. But it could still happen, I guess, on older equipment that has been forgotten about a bit. Poor design and layout. There's no guarantee that the actual design of the equipment and the design won't be faulty. So you need to keep an eye on it and make sure you get people back in if it fails, for example. Unsuitable equipment for the intended age group. That is, we've seen claims where, for example, things are too high, like a tower that's too high for the age group that play park is intended for. Incorrect installation. Again, you'd hope it wouldn't happen, but obviously you've got guys on site and they're screwing bolts into things, and they can come loose, which is the need to keep a regular eye on this equipment. Poor inspection, poor maintenance. I think that's, you'll find that some insurance policies will make it compulsory for you to inspect playgrounds in particular on a weekly basis. So you'd have to make sure you'd recorded that, because in the event of a claim, you'll find that insurer will effectively say, well, you've got no evidence that you inspected it, and now a claim's occurred, so not sure we can actually protect you on this liability claim, for example. So the inspection is partly to look for hazards of, is there glass, is there nasties in needles or something in the play part. But it's a visual inspection of the equipment itself to see whether maybe it just needs some general maintenance. And it's something that around the site itself can be dealt with quite quickly. Regarding the equipment, if it's specialist equipment, then you need to get your playground installer out quickly, and if necessary, close that piece of equipment until it's safe to use. User causes, lack of supervision. Parents tend to be on their phones, of course, so little Johnny will fall over in the corner and suddenly it's the council's fault because he's hurt himself, broken his arm or something. The misuse of equipment, we've all heard of inappropriate age groups using it, swinging on swings and breaking it, unsuitable clothing, weather conditions. Of the 40% involving play equipment, 80% were falls to the surface, 4% collision with swing seats. I kind of thought the collision with swing seats would be higher. I always think that people running in front of those is a hazard, but obviously it's children falling off things in general and hurting themselves, and then perhaps the carer looking for somebody to blame for their injury. Just a few stats there. Swings is high on the list on that one. This is fall injuries. Climbers, slides, roundabouts, seesaws, fireman's poles is a good one. So just with play areas in particular, check with your own insurer what their requirements are. They do vary. There is one insurer who has a condition on the policy schedule, Aviva. So, and it will make you responsible for weekly inspections. And it is a condition. So they'll be looking to make sure you've met that condition if there is a claim regarding the equipment. Anything found must be reported to the clerk or whoever's in control of the risk assessment. Important that written records are kept, as your insurers will want to see these if a claim is to be repudiated. All policies will say that you must have an annual ROSPRA check with any faults repaired within 30 days. So this is somebody from ROSPRA or a qualified playground inspection company will do the annual inspection to make sure they're safe. Go to events. Obviously, this time of year, we might get some Christmas events, Christmas light switch-ons. There was a lot of last weekend. I know that around here, I live in Hampshire, we had a lot of events cancelled due to adverse weather. And it was definitely was the right decision because of the high winds, because you'll have gazebos flying left, right, and centre. So liability is dependent upon who organises the event and not where it is held. So it could be a council-owned recreation ground or building that the event is being held in. But if it's been actually organised by another organisation, then it's their responsibility to control the risk. So in that case, it would be only the council's responsibility for the risk surrounding the venue itself, the location itself. So making sure that the recreation ground, there's no hazards on the grass, for example, or any hazards in the hall for that particular event. So that making sure that the venue is fit for purpose for the type of event that's taking place. We say check the area prior to the event, preferably with the organizer. So if you've got a recreation ground where there's a third-party group organising the village show, for example, you've still got a responsibility if it claim relates to, say a divot in the ground where somebody falls into, because they perhaps would have said, well, that's nothing to do with us and the event itself, that's to do with your maintenance of the ground. So you could say, well, why don't we do a joint risk assessment, or we'll work with you to do a walk around of that area to make sure it's safe before setup. If you want to do a joint risk assessment just to make sure everything is considered and covered, so both parties are covered. Trees, most councils will have some, others will have more than others. You need to have regular recorded checks to reduce the risk of a claim. And it's recommended that best practice is to engage an arboriculturalist to survey the teams and come up with a plan that works for you. There's often a question as to, well, how often do we have to have this survey? And that will often depend on your expert. They will try and do it more regularly but once a year is probably enough, unless there is changes. For example, if you've had a storm, you may want to get them to come in before the 12 months is up to do an update. Trees should be supported by regular routine checks in between by employees or volunteers, especially after stormy weather. So that, not necessarily getting in your expert there, but obviously a walk around of, especially trees that are next to paths, roadways, schools, etc. Maybe somebody does a visual inspection and jots it down that they couldn't see anything, just to identify potentially hazards like broken branches or overhanging trees on the road, so they can be dealt with really quickly. Talking about buildings a little there. Some of the claims that relate to them. I think the water damage is probably one that's increased over recent years. Burst pipes, freezing and then unfreezing after the strange weather we have. Theft is sort of theft damage to buildings. We're talking about where they smash their way in or break a door in order to gain entry, and it comes under the building's policy for the damage to the building itself. Requirements for risks on your buildings. Ongoing management, maintenance issues picked up. So you should have some sort of maintenance program in place. Looking after guttering, clearing the leaves, making sure the paths are clear from debris and slip hazards, moss, etc. Flat roof inspections. Generally every couple of years they expect it to be inspected. It could be just a builder or roofing contractor who is up there to give you a report to say whether it's safe, whether it needs any remedial attention. Minimum standard security, you'll see in most policies regard to 5-lever deadlocks on doors, but potentially window locks on accessible windows, possibly an alarm, but that's usually in high-risk locations, or if you've got something of value, high value in that building. Reasonable care should be kept with regard to key holders. So who has a key? Do you have a record of who holds a key? If they change, that person is a regular hire, for example, and they stop hiring, do you make sure you recover the keys? Same for key code pads. How are you controlling the risk as to who's got those? Health and safety, sometimes with regard to water, you might need to do Legionnaire testing. You'll probably know this if you've got a building of that type with a water tank. Revaluation of the building sum insured. So this is a reinstatement valuation, so not a market value. The note there says every 3 to 5 years. We would probably say 5 years is too long in the current environment. So probably every 3 years as a minimum. If you haven't had one done in recent years, then you need to consider having it done as soon as possible. This is public liability claims requirements. This is sort of what an insurer is likely to want to know. So we've had a report of a claim or an incident in this play park. This is what they're likely to want to know. So the date of the incident, the location, and the names of the parties involved. Details of the circumstances and nature of any injury damage suffered. Copy details of any claim, formal claim, or informal correspondence received. It's important to remember that insurers will want to see that there is an actual formal claim being made against the policyholder, the council. So if it's just somebody, as we often see, so I'm just letting you know that my aunt fell over in the car park and it was a bit slippery and just thought you'd like to know. That's not a formal claim, so they won't. So we still say tell your insurer, still log it as a potential claim, because it could be several weeks, several months later that it actually comes back and they say, following our note, she's had injuries and we're going to claim against you, and suddenly you get a solicitor's letter. So it's best to log those as an incident with the insurer. The insurer won't do anything. It won't respond to the third party unless there is an actual formal claim made, something along the lines of, I am claiming against you, I believe you were at fault or you're negligent because of this, and as a result, this injury occurred, something along those lines. So they won't deal with it, but they will log it just in case. It would be useful for insurers to have any photos of the area, the item and the damage, the injury, if they have that. Any records of the damage injury reported at the time. So there may be an accident book, there may be correspondence that they've sent in. You may find that there's chat on social media or something that you have access to and you can take screenshots of, perhaps, all evidence to back it up. Then we, of course, go back to what details of what inspection maintenance program is in place for the item or area in question. Where's your risk assessment? Did you consider that risk? Copy of the most recent reports, records, risk assessment prior to the incident. And details of any action taken since the incident. So what have you done to prevent a future loss? It could be, for example, there's a broken gate that somebody has injured themselves on. So is that noted in the risk assessment? If not, is it something that's just happened? What was the most recent report or risk assessment of the site? So they can show that it was safe on a particular date, but then it was broken overnight and then somebody injured the next day. That sort of evidence, really. And then details of action, yes, we repaired the gate, we removed the gate to prevent it happening again, that sort of thing. And this is just the same again, just to use that disclaimer again. So we'll repeat this message. If you can't back it up with evidence, then insurers won't have the ammunition they need to fight a claim successfully. And they will try and fight claims these days. In the old days, they'd try and settle it because it was cheaper to settle it quickly than to go to court potentially. They will try and fight them and say, well, we don't think our client's at fault. And we'll tell you why, because they've done risk assessments and they've got all the evidence they need to show that it was just an accident and that's all it was.